Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Converted from Salary to Hourly, Best Decision Ever. I worked for a mid-size fashion company with around 150 retail stores nationwide as a maintenance and safety coordinator. 4 months into the job, my manager quit and I picked up everything and was doing fine on my own for years, and I was the only person in charge of maintaining the stores and the alarm systems in all the stores. I did get a pay bump but not a promotion in title. I put my contact number on every store's emergency contact list just in case the primary contacts, usually the store managers, don't pick up their phones in case of emergencies. And the store managers almost always refuse to pick up calls during off hours, so my phone would ring at least 2 to 3 times every night. 99% of the times a false alarm, usually caused by window brake sensors getting tripped by vibration from a big truck passing by or a leaf hitting the window. I hated it but had to do it because if no one on the emergency contact list picks up the phone, the alarm company automatically calls the police for dispatch. And there are penalties for false alarms, ranging from $50 to $200 per incident after 2 or 3 freebies, varies by location. In 2017, Department of Labor passed a law requiring all employees making under a certain amount of dollar to be converted to hourly so they can earn overtime. My salary was $800 short of making the cut. I brought it up with HR stating that an hourly schedule would actually interfere with my duties and a $800 raise in pay would make everything easier. And HR simply said, "Well, that's too bad and we can't do anything about it at the moment." Well, okay. After that conversation, I put my phone on mute and stopped caring about anything outside of my 9 to 5. In hindsight, life was actually so much easier and better that way, and not sure why I even wanted to stay on salary. Months go by without any serious issues, except for the penalties for false alarms starting to pile up. One day accounting and operations brought me into the office asking what those costs were. I told them what they were, and operations sent out a memo reminding all store managers that safety is of critical importance and they have to pick up calls from alarm companies. No one bothered asking why there was a surge of these additional costs, and I didn't care enough to remind them that it was because of me. Few more months go by and one morning I woke up to almost 20 missed calls on my cell. Apparently, one of our Florida stores was broken into the night before at around 3 a.m. The store manager tried to get a hold of me because I was the one in charge of dispatching vendors for things like emergency board up. After an hour of trying to get a hold of me, she eventually started calling up everybody on the hierarchy for help, and I had 6 missed calls from the senior VP of operations alone. Eventually the director of constructions was able to get a crew to board up the store, but that was almost 3 hours later and everyone was royally upset. Unsurprisingly, the second I stepped into the office, I was called into the office with all the senior management and HR and was asked why I was not there to take care of it. And I simply replied, because I already clocked out. The senior VP of operations was obviously not pleased with that answer and said it was my duty and I needed to be on standby at all times to handle these situations even during off hours. To which I stated, "Oh, so I should be on call then? In that case I'll have to work with accounting to get properly compensated for my on-call hours once we have a schedule established." The room went silent, and nothing came out of the rather short meeting. Later that afternoon, HR called me into the office again asking whether I'd like to become salaried again with a pay bump. I said I'll take the pay bump but I'd rather stay hourly, and walked out. They didn't give me the pay bump. Edit, sorry I didn't provide what happened next. So here's some closure. I was put on call for a few weeks because it was summer at the time of the incident and HVAC systems kept failing over the weekends in our Florida stores. And again, I was the one to dispatch vendors to fix them. Money was great during that period. Eventually the director of constructions was put on as the emergency contact for off-hour issues and he absolutely hated it. I left the company last year. They had to scramble to get a replacement and hired a maintenance supervisor with an MBA in political science, but no related experience. My last contact from the company was the supervisor asking me what the login credentials were for all the 150 stores' alarm systems. I didn't reply. Next one is titled, Why I Am Against BYOD, Bring Your Own Device, for Work. I was working contract security at a site that was a government site. I had requested a cell phone and a camera to be added to the site for months, but I was told that the site did not warrant it. I documented a break-in and started documenting things on the camera on my cell phone. I called the police and the client to notify things that happened. The weather started to change and it started raining really hard. My initial photographs were going to be needed and the police wanted to take my phone for the chain of custody. I told them that I could give them the phone for $1,200, which is what it would cost me to replace the phone. My security company told me if I did not give up my phone I would be fired. I said okay, I am fired, then I drove off the site. As per policy, any information from a site that is taken on a personal device has to be deleted once an employee is fired to get your last check. I went to pick up my last check and showed them the factory reset to get my last check. I had been subpoenaed to testify in a court case about 6 months after I was fired. I go up and I am asked to produce the evidence I had recorded from that night. I tell the judge that I had to show a factory wipe in order to get my last paycheck from my security company. I found out later that the insurance company did not pay out the claim for the break-in damages and my previous security company lost a $2 million a year contract. The guy who was arrested for the break-in walked due to lack of evidence. Next one is titled, Blockbuster Nipples. In college I got a job working at Blockbuster. For those of you too young to know what a Blockbuster is, it was like if Netflix had an actual store and in order to play a video you had to drive to the store, pick out a movie, pay the cashier, drive back home, then play the movie. I also had an eyebrow piercing, which didn't seem to be a problem during the interview or the training, since it was never brought up. The night of my first shift I was putting my bag down in the back room and the manager says, "You're going to have to take the eyebrow ring out." I explained that I just got it and I was afraid it would close up if I took it out, and I asked why it had to come out. And he told me, "It's a distraction to the customers, so you either have to take it out or wear a band-aid over it." I told him I wasn't going to take it out, so I'll remember to bring a band-aid next time. He told me to wait a moment and he went and got the first aid kit and gave me a band-aid to put on for the night. That first night 90% of the customers asked me what happened, as if I was injured. As it turns out, wearing a big band-aid over your eyebrow is a distraction to the customers. This went on for a solid week, maybe 5 to 6 shifts. Then one night I was ringing customers up, the manager behind the counter with me, and a woman with 3 kids in tow asks, "What's up with the band-aids?" And I tell her it's to cover my eyebrow piercing because it's distracting to the customers. She responds, "Well, that makes sense, piercings can be distracting sometimes, I have a few of my own." My eyes moved from her eye contact to her ears and she says, "No, lower." My eyes then drop to her chest and she says, "Yes, and lower." I scanned her card and she had a late fee, which I immediately cancelled, and scanned her 2 movies and she said, "One for the kids, one for me, just wish I had someone to watch it with, maybe you want to come over and we can check out each other's piercings." That night as we were closing the store the manager told me I didn't need to wear the band-aid anymore, and I said, "I kind of like it, it's an icebreaker." Next one is titled, You Want a Battery? Fine, I'll get you a battery. Happened a couple of years ago and I'm pretty sure this qualifies as malicious compliance. I'm in the US and do parts work, specifically automotive, formerly, lawn, and small construction equipment. Fun fact, most batteries in the US, and I think North America in general, are all produced by East Penn. All the common auto parts stores, a lot of automotive dealerships, etc. All they do is slap a different label on it depending on where you buy it. So, I had a gentleman come in looking for a battery for his Kubota. I look it up and see there's an automotive equivalent, meaning, it's the same thing, just labeled differently, and I quote the customer a battery from an auto parts store. This is pretty common practice. My customer asked me if it was a Kubota battery and I said no, and started to explain the above when he decided to rudely interrupt me, huge pet peeve of mine, and demand I get him a Kubota battery. I kept trying to explain, but he didn't want to listen. "All right sir, please hold, I'll be right back." I take my time looking up a Kubota battery, checking warehouse stock, shipping costs, timeframe. Another reason why we used local auto parts stores is because batteries have to be shipped special on account of the acid in them, etc. I take the total price, add a $100 on top of my normal markup and shipping, so it was stupidly expensive now, and let him know it will be a week or so before I can get it in. Surprisingly enough, dude actually ordered it. Complained about the price the whole time, and every time I'd reply with some version of, "Well sir, it is a Kubota battery." Edit: a few of you have mentioned warranties, but I recall this machine being old and out of warranty, and even if it was in, he still would have had to bring it in and have a certified tech diagnose and replace the battery for it to be covered. Next one is titled, "You want me to use real bandages for fake injuries?" Fine, but it would be a shame if something real happened. After clusterfuck, I finally have some downtime, until the next batch of vaccines arrive, to share an MC story, without going on a rant. Needed background: my country has conscription. That means that every able male between the age of 18 to 35, has to serve in the armed forces for a time. I did mine in the Navy. My specialty was medic, finishing as a petty officer. After you finish the service, you're put in the active reserve list and they can call you in an emergency and for refresh courses. Those can last between 1 day to a month. This happened during my first such course. Also important, despite servicing in the Navy, due to being an essential specialty, I could be called by any branch. First time was the Army. On to the story. I receive a letter to present myself on a certain date in a certain Army base for a refresher course. I knew it would be annoying, but I arrived on that date with my backpack and wearing my navy blue garrison utilities with chevrons on. Immediately I had a problem when a corporal tried to order me to sign for a rifle. Medics carry handguns or don't carry arms at all. After that was shorted, I fell in with the rest of the retrainees, as they called us. We're 20 people, ranging in ages from 22 to 45. I noticed that except from me, only one other person is wearing different utilities, light blue of the Air Force, and he happens to be a doctor. The rest are Army, mostly infantry. After 3 days of basically doing nothing, orders came down that me and the doc would have to join the senior class of officer cadets on their war games. We go to request equipment and they hand us 2 first aid bags, medium size, with some basic supplies. The doc asked for more supplies. The quartermaster said those supplies were all we were going to get according to regulations. The doc asked for that in writing before he signed anything out, which was provided. So, Saturday comes, me and the doc get a ride with the cadets to the exercise area. We set up post in the neutral zone and wait. Our job was to provide first aid if something happened and treat and record any casualties of the war games. Almost immediately, cadet that was acting captain from now on, tried to boss us around, complaining about our setup, our lack of discipline, we were civilians, and our lack of polish, we were there just for legal reasons. The acting captain of the other team was much more relaxed with us. The next morning the war games begin. Around noon, our first casualties start trickling in. Each casualty tells us the nature of their injury, we record it and the doc decides if it's a walking wounded, need to spend time in the infirmary or is off for the rest of the games, which meant staying in the stage area. Due to not being a live ammo exercise and our small amount of supplies, we pretty much give them a paper with their new status. Next day, first thing in the morning, the captain bursts in and he is in a mood. He starts shouting that about not doing our job. The following exchange happens. Doc, calm down and explain. Captain, you're not doing your jobs. I don't know who my casualties are. Doc, we gave them a paper about their status. Captain, that's not good enough. You have to dress their wounds. Do I have to tell you how to be a doctor? Doc, I don't think it's a good use of our little resources. Captain, no. You have to use it, so I can know who my casualties are. Doc, I still think is a bad use of resources. Captain, I gave you an order. I'm acting captain and you're just a warrant officer. Doc, okay, but it's your problem if something happens. The captain stormed off after that. Cue malicious compliance. A couple of hours later, the first casualties of the day start coming in. I ask the doc what we should do. Doc, you heard the man. Full trauma protocol. We exchange evil grins and open up the bags. Anyone coming in gets the full treatment. Bullet wound to the leg, cut the pants open, sterilize the area, pad and bandage and medevac. Head wound, full concussion protocol. Surface head wound, sterilize the area, 3 pads and a couple of bandages to keep them in place. Our supplies are out on the 10th casualty. And then, karma strikes. They bring in the captain with a legit sprained ankle. He goes on a rant about bandaging him so he can go back to command. Doc, I'm sorry. We are out of supplies. We have to call in for resupply. Captain, what? How can you be out of supplies? Doc, despite me telling you we have very little supplies, you ordered us to treat every casualty as it was real. The supplies are finished. The captain started spouting threats, while Doc put in for resupply. The aftermath. A couple of the umpires, 2 lieutenants, and the quartermaster, sergeant, brought more supplies. The captain tried, and failed miserably, to pin the blame on us. The umpires, after hearing his order, shook their heads and removed him immediately from command. According to the quartermaster, the captain was kind of jerk during training, but got the post because of family connections. For the next 3 days, we went back to our original plan, papers, and treated a couple of real injuries. I don't know what happened to the captain afterwards, but for the rest of the refresher course, we had a good time. Last one is titled, but the transfer number doesn't go to the right place. It goes, okie dokie. Shutting up. You're the boss. Several years back I worked at a call center in its death throes doing tech support for a small primarily business-based ISP that was also dying due to terrible service, insane prices, and not changing with the times. So one of the managers wrote up by hand this handy-dandy cheat sheet that had a ton of numbers to different departments, manufacturing companies and other places we regularly had to send customers to. It was honestly good to have as it saved tons of time searching for the numbers every time you needed them. The problem was, however, that one of the numbers at the bottom that every agent used about 30+ times a day had a typo, was poorly written. Basically a 7 that looked like a 9 or vice versa. Turns out, that one number was the difference between speaking to some boring router maker or busty college teens who wanted nothing more in life than to talk dirty to you for $3.99 a minute. If we did what we are supposed to do, this is a cold transfer. For those lucky enough to not know call center lingo, it's when you transfer the call without waiting to talk to someone on the other line to explain why the customer is calling. You just transfer and end the call without walking the customer through or waiting to hear the other line. It's essentially a, this isn't our problem anymore so CYA later transfer. For about a solid month or two, about 100 agents had been transferring hundreds if not thousands of people a day to this phone sex line. I was on a call with an old lady and I had to transfer the call over. But I needed a few moments to finish writing my notes before the next one came in. So instead of hanging up as soon as I heard the ringing telling me it was transferring, I just connected the call and muted myself for a second. She was gonna have to listen to the options for about 3 minutes and wait on hold anyway, so it's not like I would hear anything. That's when instead of hearing the thanks for calling so and so I heard a soft sexy lady's voice come on the line and say, hey there sexy. I heard you like hot busty college girls that want you to, blah blah, I will let your imagination fill in the rest. I was already reaching for the hang-up when I heard the lady on the other line gasp in surprise. After laughing at the surprise when I realized what had happened, I looked at the sheet and cross-checked it with the database. And that's when I saw the 7 was written to look like a 9 by mistake, bad handwriting. The same sheet that was just photocopied, lamented and handed out to every employee with a note to be mandated by our betters is to be stuck on the wall of each cubicle and exclusively used from now on instead of the database. I asked about 7 or 8 people without telling them why, what the number for X was and they all told me the same incorrect number. Oh, me being young and dumb I thought I had discovered something the managers on call would be happy to hear about and go around correcting everyone's sheet with a red marker or something simple. Instead, I got yelled at for being off the phones when I should be taking calls. They didn't even want to hear what I said and told me unless the building's on fire or my shift is over I need to get back to my seat and stop bothering them. They claimed I was lying and trying to get out of working. I'm here to answer phone calls and not to think. So instead of just taking a second to dial the number and confirm the error, they decided to lecture me. Sigh, managers. Surprised, I just shook my head and went back to my desk. I explained what had happened and everyone on the floor tried it to see and had a good laugh about it. Instead of making the correction though, we did as we were told and kept using the incorrect number. About a month went by before they had finally gotten enough complaints from customers to launch an investigation into what was happening and how this mysterious problem could be happening. Meanwhile, it was an open secret every frontline agent knew. Sadly, no one got in trouble, and the call center shut down about 6 months later out of the blue, as they are wont to do. But at least all the frontline agents got to have a good laugh at the expense of rude and ignorant management. Whenever we had to transfer someone, it was a highlight of our day because it felt like we were sticking it to management. And at least the shitty company lost some money assigning people to investigate the problem. Thanks for listening.